Dr. Demartini, thank you so much for joining us. It's an absolute pleasure to have you here.
No, thank you.
Before we get started, I was wondering if you could, for the viewers that maybe haven't yet come across your work, if you can just give us a little bit of a journey of how you've come from a chiropractor to now being one of the world's renowned specialists in human behavior.
Well, I was fascinated by anything that maximized human awareness and potential and healing since I was 17. So I've been teaching now for 43 years. And I was involved in the studying of psychology and biology and healthcare since way back, beginning. And I was practicing, but I noticed even in practice, I was noticing the relationship between psychology and physiology and the mind-body connection. That was my focus. I've written many books in that area. Mm-hmm. And so I've just been doing that, and I was lecturing even while I was in school, before school, during school, after school. And then when I got in practice, I've been speaking and traveling and doing this. So I've been doing it all along. So it's not that I just transitioned from one to the other, I just kept expanding it.
Expanding the body of work.
Yeah.
One of the things that I love that I read, that you don't look at depression as a disease, you actually look at it as a healing process. Can you explain a little bit more about what you mean by that?
Well, I always say this depression is a comparison of our current reality to a unrealistic expectation, fantasy, or delusion that we're addicted to. Many people are depressed, and when I ask them, so what are you expecting it to be? And they go, well, it should be this way. Life should be this way, or this aspect of life should be this way. When I ask them, so if it was that way, what would be the drawback to that? They have no drawbacks. So they have a fantasy and a delusion, because everything in life has two sides. So therefore their reality is unfulfilling because they're comparing it to this thing that has no downsides. And so when life has a balance compared to something that has no downside, they are depressed. So I would say depression is a feedback mechanism to awaken us consciously to the delusions and unrealistic expectations and fantasies that we get addicted to, and to give us an opportunity to break that, to associate pain with that fantasy pleasure, to help us stabilize ourselves and get in order. But we keep having this hedonic treadmill wanting to get a one-sided world instead of embracing the two sides of life, which helps us stabilize ourselves.
Okay. So what I'm seeing there is there's a massive lesson around honoring the law of polarity.
Well, when we have objective reasoning and we have more balanced mind, we're more stable. When we have some sort of a subjective bias where we're striving for a one-sided world. In Buddhism, there was a teaching that said the desire for that which is unavailable and the desire to avoid that which is unavoidable is a source of human suffering. And many people are striving for a one-sided world, and instead of embracing the two sides that life has to offer.
And how they can actually complement
You need
one
both.
another.
I asked a lady the other day in one of my seminars, the Breakthrough Experience, I said, if I gave you a magnet, and I said, I'm going to give you $1 billion worth of cash if you can give me one pole of the magnet back. I'm going to give you a whole magnet, give me just the positive pole back. Now, if you're ignorant, you try to get and cut the magnet in half and try to get, but what happens when you cut it in half? You get 2 little magnets with positive and negative. Or if you cut it again, 4 magnets. You can't really separate the two. And we tend to separate the inseparables and divide the indivisibles and try to label the unlabelables and name the ineffable and polarize the unpolarizables and not embrace both sides of life. So a person striving for a one-sided magnet will be futile. And this is what people feel. They feel futile and depressed because they're striving for a one-sided world.
So the Demartini method, when we're looking at overcoming depression and anxiety as one particular area, you have a very simple 3-step process. Can you share what that 3-step process is?
Yeah, what are you specifically comparing your life to, the way you wish it would be, which is sort of the delusion and fantasy? What's the drawbacks of that, and what's the benefit of reality? Because if you're comparing yourself and your reality to something that's not there, there's no way you can win, because that's not real. What's real is what's real. So how is the benefit, what's the benefit of what's real, and what's the drawback of the fantasy you wish it would be? Because sometimes you get hold on to the idea that that thing is supposed to be a certain way and it's going to be all peachy keen when it's that way. Mm-hmm. I have to share a story. I had a gentleman that was bitter and really resentful to his father and depressed because his father never showed affection for him. And I asked him a simple question in the Breakthrough Experience. So if your father had done that in your life when you were 16, before you left home, when he kicked you out, If he had been this affectionate person like you wanted, what would have been the drawback? He goes, there would be no drawback. I'd been happy. And I said, no, what would have been the drawback? He goes, I can't see any. I said, did you have any brothers and sisters? He goes, well, yeah, I had a brother. And did your father give the affection that you wished that you had gotten to the brother? He says, yeah, he got all the affection. I said, would you trade places with him today? He goes, oh no, he's still living at home. He's never grown up. He's never even gone on his own and has a job. He's waiting for the parents to die. He's basically a dependent, an enabled, disabled person. I said, so you'd rather have had that life? He goes, I would have until I just realized what you just said. I said, so what you got is your father believed in you and challenged you and said, go, you stand on your own. You wouldn't have done that if he didn't believe you could do it. And you're an entrepreneur today, very successful entrepreneur, and your brother, who you thought you wanted a life of, you wouldn't trade places today. So what's the drawback if it would have been that way? And he broke down in tears and had affection for his father for the first time since he was 16. He was 42. So he was comparing his life all those years to what he thought it should have been, instead of embracing the way it is. And so many people are not embracing life or being grateful for life the way it is and keep comparing it to something that doesn't exist.
So you're starting to, answer my next question, which is the Demartini method has got some very specific underlining values and teachings that a lot of the more traditional methods of psychology and psychiatry don't have. And from my observation, it's what stands the Demartini method as being far more effective than perhaps some of the older, more traditional methods. Can you elaborate a little bit more as to how you would differentiate between those methods?
Yeah. In the number of, about a century or so ago, there was a guy named Jeremy Bentham who created a model of hedonism, kind of a utilitarian model of hedonism, that we're supposed to be happy and supposed to be pleasureful, and it's our birthright to always be up, always be positive, always be happy. And even your grandmother says, be nice, don't be mean, be kind, don't be cruel, be positive, don't be negative, be giving, don't be taking, and it's all one-sided. Mm-hmm. And yet she ends up going and bitching at grandpa and then stealing from grandpa. So she has a hypocrisy in a sense. Yep. And we have this fantasy we're supposed to be one-sided, and the foundation of psychology, a lot of it, not all of it, but a lot of it, is animal psychology. It's avoiding the predator and seeking the prey, avoiding pain, seeking pleasure. It's very hedonistic. And the problem with that model is if we were to do that and we would just eat sugar and have sex all day long, and we'd have diabetics and sexual problems. Wisdom is embracing both sides and more objective reasoning. And when we live by our highest values, we have more objective reasoning. When we're unfulfilled in our life, we look like an animal for a one-sided world. And I always say that addicted behavior to a one-sided world is a compensation for unfulfilled highest values. So when people don't find meaning and don't find fulfillment doing something that's meaningful and prioritizing their life and doing what really inspires them, they'll be vulnerable for avoiding pain and seeking pleasure. And the entire psychological movement, which are called shrinks, which shrink people, instead of stretchers, which stretch people, are basically promoting that whole animalistic model. And what I'm offering in the Demartini method is something more transcendent to that, something that allows people to embrace both sides of their life. You don't have to get rid of half of your life to love yourself. You don't have to get rid of half of the other people in your life to love them. You just need to be realistic about life, because it has pain and pleasure. It has support and challenge. It has both sides of life. Even the marriage ceremonies, when you look at it, it's for rich or for poor, for this or for that, it's both. Mm-hmm. But we forget that, and we then want it to only support us without challenge, ease without difficulty. So I'm trying to ground people and realize that life has both sides, and embrace both sides, because both are needed. We don't grow if we're only supported. We stay juvenile dependents all our life. If we get challenged and we get responsibilities, we become precociously independent and grow. We need both. Maximum growth and development occurs at the border of support and challenge, ease and difficulty. And real leaders are not trying to shrink from challenge. They go after challenges, fill their day with challenges that inspire them, because that way their life doesn't fill up with challenges that don't. So embracing both sides of life is the difference in my model and what I work with people. And as a result of it, we can transform people that have depression very quickly compared to what's being used out there. Because they're trying to feed this fantasy in people and polarizing people for them.
So something you mentioned in that was the importance of getting really clear on what your core values are. First of all, how can our audience, who may right now be stuck in a place of overwhelmment or anxiety or in a deep depression, what kind of simple exercise can they start to do to start to create some clearer core values that they can then start to work on in order to take them closer to understanding what creates meaning and purpose in their life so they can start to make choices that feed that?
Well, they don't need to find values that do that. They already have them. Every human being lives by a set of priorities, a set of values already. And we have this idea that we're supposed to pick them up from our parents or get it from society or whatever. The people that really made a difference in the world are not the people that fit into society. The people that make a difference are the people that are transcending the implications that society is always imposing. Traditionalism, conventionalism, it's the people that do something beyond that that actually contribute to the growth of society. So it's not about trying to get them into us or trying to find them that way. It's looking at our life and looking at what our life demonstrates, because our life demonstrates our values already, right now. So you look at how you fill your space. You look at how you spend your time. You look at what you're energized by. You look at what you spend your money on. You look at where you're organized. You look at where you're disciplined and reliable and focused. You look at what you think about and visualize and talk to yourself about most that's coming true in your life. You look at what you want to converse with other people about. And you look also at what in the goals that you have that are consistent and persistent that you achieve, and then look at what it is you love learning and studying and reading about most. Those are the indicators. Those are the value determinants that reveal to you what's really important to you. And the second you set goals that are aligned with that highest value, the things that are really important, you're more objective, you're more realistic, you're more resilient and adaptable. You tend to achieve things. You tend to set goals that are more manageable. You have this self-governance. The executive center in the brain, the telencephalon, comes online and self-governs you and makes you strategic and visionary and really go out there and execute. But if you don't live by the highest values, the unfulfillment activates the amygdala area of the brain, which wants to avoid pain and seek pleasure. It's the animal brain. And that's where most psychology is, and that's where most people are trapped. They're looking for a one-sided world, trying to avoid the other side, and they're running around in this anxiety and fear all the time because they're holding on to a fantasy about how life is, and the other side's there. It's like trying to have a two-sided magnet, and they're wanting to get one side, and then the other side keeps following around because they're expecting to get rid of the other side of the magnet. And the other side's there, and I don't want that. So they're fearful of that other magnet side coming when they need it. They need it to grow. So I'm interested in helping people find their own values, their highest values. On my website, I have a tool on there that they can follow. It simply. It's free. They can go on there, drdemartini.com. They can go on there and learn how to find their values and start orchestrating and prioritizing and structuring their life accordingly. When they do, they're more resilient, they're more realistic in their expectations, they achieve more, their self-worth goes up, their internal dialogue changes. They are saying thank you for life instead of the other things in life.
So, in your experience, and I know how many hundreds of thousands of people that you've helped transform their lives, have you observed a certain belief system that is common amongst those that suffer from depression and anxiety?
Yeah. They're expecting to live in other people's values, and they're trying to live outside their own values, or they're expecting other people to live in their values or outside their values. Or they're expecting the world to be a one-sided world, which is not possible, or they're expecting mechanical objects to work in a way that matches their fantasy. So they have unrealistic expectations. There's 15 most common ones that I found that lead to depression. The unrealistic expectation that the world or the people around them are supposed to be one-sided. They're always supposed to be nice, not mean, always kind, not cruel, giving, not taking. Mm-hmm. Nobody's that way. I'm not nice. I'm nice and mean. I'm kind and cruel. I'm generous and stingy. I'm everything. I've learned that I have all 4,628 traits that I've ever found in the Oxford Dictionary. So if you expect somebody to be one side, you're going to have what I call the ABCDs of negativity: anger and aggression, blame and betrayal, criticism and challenge, despair and depression, add an E, exit and escape. You're going to want to escape life. Those ABCDEs of negativity are a byproduct of having unrealistic expectations. Then you're expecting other people to live in your values or outside their own values. You're going to be angry now for that because that's not going to happen because they make decisions based on their own values. Then you're going to expect yourself to live outside your values or in a one-sided world. Or you're expecting the world to be that way or live in your values. The whole world's supposed to match your values. These are delusions. Or you're expecting objects, mechanical things to work the way you fantasize instead of the way they're designed. So anytime you have all these unrealistic expectations, depression is a feedback mechanism to let you know that you're projecting unrealistic expectations onto the world and onto people and onto yourself. And the second you stop that and set realistic expectations, your depression doesn't have to be there. It's not a disease, it's a normal biological response to unrealistic expectations.
So what I'm hearing there then, that part of the pivotal point of change is to choose to no longer be a victim consciousness of your circumstances.
Well, I've never seen a victim consciousness who blames people. People who blame things on the outside look for saviors on the outside. They look for things out there to save them. And they become addicted to those things they think is going to save them from this thing that they're blaming. I've never seen that make empowerment. I've seen people take on accountability and take on their own cause of their own effect and all of a sudden transform their perception. William James basically said that the greatest discovery of his generation is that human beings can alter their lives by altering their perceptions and attitudes of mind. I find that to be true. You can change your perception. Every weekend in the breakthrough experience, I have people with the most horrendous stuff that they had in life and that they're wanting to run stories over and they want to be victims of and they want to just go on and on and on about it. And I stop the story because it malentates the brain and keeps them stuck and says, let's look at it from a different perspective and ask, how's it serve you? And if it had not happened, what would have been the drawback? And ask a new set of questions. I have 48 questions that I ask people. And when all of a sudden they're done, they're having tears of gratitude for the same event. It had nothing to do with the event. It's all about their perception of the event. And then all of a sudden, instead of blaming the environment or whatever that caused their problem, or they're blaming their parents or their family dynamics, I hear this all the time, they change it and then they're thankful for that. Anything you can't say thank you for is baggage. Anything you can say thank you for is fuel.
Wow, that's powerful.
Yeah.
That's really powerful.
I'm very grateful to be able to work with people, watch this happen. Very, very inspiring to watch the light bulbs go on and people all of a sudden realize that there's nothing wrong with them and there's nothing wrong with what happened in their life. It's just an experience. It's an event.
That's the other thing that I love about your work is that it just completely takes the stigma out of there being a mental health problem. When you look at it as a feedback mechanism, to give you feedback as to basically what you do want versus what you don't want.
I really believe that all the signs and symptoms of our body are feedback mechanisms to guide us to live authentically. And that sounds kind of broad, but really going into the depth of what that means is very significant. Very commonly I have people come to me in the breakthrough experience and they say, well, I have a biochemical imbalance and the reason I have bipolar or schizoid behavior, or dissociative disorder, all this stuff is because I have biochemical imbalance in the brain. And I go, okay, that's fine. But I explained to him, I said, imagine being in this room and all of a sudden over that door, I open up the door and a giant tiger jumps in and leaps across the room and is going towards you. And it's got its fangs out and it's about to eat your head. And you turn and you look and you go, oh my God, tiger. And you protect yourself. If we stop and got a Men in Black pen, stop everything. And all of a sudden said, all right, let's go and do a biochemistry on their brain. We would find that the dopamine is low, the enkephalons are down, serotonin is dropped, vasopressin, oxytocin, estrogen, they're all dropped. And epinephrine, norepinephrine, testosterone, histamine, substance P, and all these other chemistries in the brain are all skyrocketing. Right there on the spot, from that perception, change chemistry. So if we freeze frame it, we'd find a biochemical imbalance, see? Because they're imagined to be eaten by a tiger. So their perception is live, thinking they're going to eat a tiger. Then if I take the pen and stop and let the tiger come and it jumps and it licks them, and it tells them it's Tony Tiger, and it hugs them. And all of a sudden, the person, then we stop, freeze frame it again, and they feel really action. They go, oh my God, a little beautiful tiger, it's my little pet tiger. And we go and we see the complete opposite chemistry occur. So if it's biochemistry by itself, how can it change that quick? And people sometimes, I bet everybody's had this experience where they're sitting at home, it's a weekend, the husband and wife are fighting. They're having this quarrel. And they're really at it, each other. They're really going after each other. And then all of a sudden the doorbell rings. And a friend they haven't seen in 20 years goes in the doorbell. Just happened to be in the neighborhood. And they stop the fighting and they go, oh, hi. They put on a facade and they suppress that. Yep. And it goes now unconscious and subconscious. And then they end up, for 2 hours and hang out with their friends. And they never get back to complete the fight. But they still got memories and stored secondary and tertiary associations with that original event. And so now what happens is all that subconscious, and they go about their business and everything else, and now almost anything can trigger that original memory that's never been balanced. And so those things drive biochemistries and leave people in biochemical imbalance, not because it's just randomly there, the biochemistry in the brain is not working. It's because we've accumulated a whole bunch of unconscious and subconscious stuff that we've never neutralized and balanced in our life and seen balanced in a balanced perspective. And so it's sitting there running our chemistry. And we don't have a way of testing that real mind state. All we're looking at is chemistry. And that's the problem with some of the psychiatric work. They go in there and they measure they find that there's a zebra in the bathtub, but they don't ask why. They measure the stripes, they measure the dung, they measure the length of the zebra, but they don't ask why is the zebra in the bathtub? Why is the biochemistry imbalanced? It's because of those imbalances, and they've never been addressed. Because when we go in there and neutralize those with the Demartini method, and we change chemistries, they go, well, something's happened, your brain changed.
So I was just about to ask, what in the Demartini method enables you to help somebody who's in a place of, subconscious or unaware of the past emotional experiences that they are still biochemically responding to by other triggers? What's the process that you take people through that?
Well, you got a number of ways of doing it. You can actually go back and peel the onion back layer by layer and eventually get to these core issues that are back there. You can ask them the history, and sometimes in history you can reveal what this thing was triggered by. You can look at anxieties, because anxiety is secondary and tertiary compounding of original events that have never been balanced. Now things are reminding you of those events, and they're not even aware that those things are associated with the original event. Like we had a young boy that his mother and father were fighting, and the father was wearing a white shirt, had brown hair, brown mustache, blue jeans, and they were fighting, and he got really aggressive to the mother. The child didn't want to see that, and it went crawling to its room and covered its ears and closed its eyes and hid under the bed. So it was associated, that image, with pain, seeing mommy get hurt. So the next day, daddy went off to work and mommy took the boy to the grocery store. But now at the grocery store, there's a man with blue jeans and a white shirt with brown hair and a mustache. The second he came down the aisle, the baby got in front of the mother and got in front of the mother to protect the mother, and turned around and started making a tantrum to get the mother away. So this was a secondary association with the primary event. And these things can go tertiary and quaternary, and they can just keep compounding. And now all of a sudden a guy with blue jeans and a yellow shirt with brown hair, or now a guy with white shirt, blonde hair and blue jeans. There's different things that can make secondary associations. After a while, we don't even know all the things that are triggering the original event that's making us feel anxious. And it's raising our blood pressure and it's causing these changes and chemistry changes. And then we go to the psychiatrist and he says, well, you have a biochemical imbalance again. And you have these imbalanced things, we got to change your chemistry and give this anti-anxiety pill. Well, that's fine. That's a quick pill for every ill. But the reality is you have command over your life. If you want to give it away, that's fine. But if you want to take command, there's work involved, and most people don't want to do the work. But if they do the work, they can give themselves their power back. And I'd rather work there. I'd rather help people reclaim their power than give them a blame on the outside and a magic pill from the outside.
So what I've seen and experienced as well from participating in some of your workshops is that in 5 days you can transform what psychiatrists, psychologists can spend a number of years working on the same thing with people by using these methods.
Well, in the breakthrough experience, which is 2 days, which I do almost every city, every weekend, I do it somewhere in the world, we don't do it in 5 days, we do it in a matter of hours sometimes. Some of these conditions are resolved in hours. It's quite amazing. But I don't ever label it. I don't label disease as a condition. I don't say, well, we're treating it or I'm curing it. I don't like those terms. I think that's creating a label on people. I just say that you're a human being, you have physiology, it's doing its job. Because if you're having an unrealistic expectation and life's not matching it, you're going to change your chemistry. And your chemistry is doing what it's designed to do in those perceptions. So instead of it seeing it as an illness, why not see it as what your body is designed to do and it's giving you a feedback. I use the analogy, if you went out and ate a pizza and then a steak and then a bowl of sauerkraut and then a cheesecake and then a chocolate cake and then a bunch of stewed prunes and then some tomatoes and then went out and had some beans.
I'm already feeling the feedback.
Okay. The next morning you wake up, you're going to be puffy eyes, you're going to have a headache, you're going to have bloat and cramps and gas and diarrhea and stomach cramps and nauseous and oily skin and all that stuff. Well, if you go to some medical doctor, he'd probably say, well, you need an anti-flatulent, an antihistamine, you need an anti-cramp, you need an anti-this. And it's giving you a symptom because he tries to get rid of your symptoms so you can feel positive, happy.
Yep.
Right? That model is still like the psychology model. It's still trying to avoid pain and seek pleasure. But if you go to another health professional that's thinking more of a feedback mechanism, he says, your history shows that you're pigged out and your symptoms in your body are trying to wake you up to that. And if you don't regulate that and you keep taking medication and you don't get the lesson, you'll keep taking medication, keep pigging out, get rid of the symptoms, keep pigging out, and never grow up and get to feedback that your body's trying to offer you. So I really believe that a lot of the symptoms that we have that we think are illness are actually wellness, trying to guide us back to balanced and authentic living, to live by our highest values, to live fulfilled. So it's wise to ask those questions and find the meaning in the disease instead of label of the disease.
I love it. I love it. So can we talk about environment? You know, in my experience, often when I'm helping with people with depression, anxiety, because of their mental state at that time, they often are not looking after their environment that has a massive influence again in their perception. So what advice can we give people in terms of how to look after their environment more effectively to support their mental and emotional state?
Well, you know, there's grant me the wisdom to know when I can control things and not control things, as they say. There's some things you may be able to control in your environment, and they're so wise to do so. It's wise to bring in order and organization and help it, help you accomplish your goals. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, if there's nothing you can do about it, and it's somebody else's environment, and you happen to be there, you could change and say, thank you very much, I'm going to stay in a hotel, or I'm going to grow and become entrepreneur-like so I can pay for my own life. You could go and empower yourself and go and create another environment. Or you could go in there and change your perception. I always say you have two things you can do. You can change your actions and prioritize them and delegate lower priority things and get on to doing what's more meaningful to you. Or you can change your perceptions of what's happening. And I think it's wise to master both. I think it's wise to go in and take whatever's happening in your environment and find out how you can use it. Because no matter what happens, there's a way of using it to your advantage. I had a gentleman that was basically bitching about his family and how they are this and that. And I said, so let's look at how we can use it to our advantage. He goes, well, there is no advantage to it. It's crazy. I'm a dysfunctional family. That's where I come from. I said, well, if you want to label that and follow that pathway, that's fine. That started by John Bradshaw, who I knew a long time ago, and that whole model. I said, but you could go in there and say, well, how can you use it? And we sat down for about 2 hours and took everything that he despised and hated about his environment, and we asked how we can use it to help him fulfill what's most valuable. We found out what was valuable to his life, what his life demonstrated was important to him. And we asked, how is that experience helping him? At first he said, no, nothing. Look again, because everything has two sides. So what is the benefit side to it? And we looked for it, and we found it. And all of a sudden his anxiety and his stress and his fear about those doing it, because fear is an assumption that you're about to experience more pain and pleasure, more loss than gain. But that's your perception that's creating that. You can change your perception and all of a sudden change that whole feeling.
And change the biochemistry.
Yeah, change your chemistry. If I was to take your thumb, put it on the table, and take a hammer and slam it, you'd think, what the hell's going on? What's wrong with you? And you go, ow, that's crazy. But if I told you I'm going to give you $1 billion cash if I slam your thumb on there.
How many people would put their thumb right there?
Go for it. Billion cash. You go, woo, slam my thumb and I can go to get for $5,000, I can repair it. So they'd take it and they go put it out there. They'd actually be looking forward to it because there's enough reward for it. So instead of waiting for the rewards out there to come to you mysteriously, why don't you look for them? Why not take the same environment and find out how it serves you and use it to your advantage? If you can move on and say goodbye to the environment, great. But if you're in that environment and you're not ready to move on because you're young or whatever, and you're not as empowered, it either will catalyze you to go and empowered and go create your own environment the way you want it, or go find out how it serves you and use it to your advantage. You don't have to be a victim of anything. You just ask a new set of questions.
So what I'm hearing there is that there's really an opportunity in every moment to see the gift in the struggle.
I really believe that the wisdom is the instantaneous recognition that crisis is blessing, that tragedy is ecstasy, that terrible is terrific, and all pairs of opposites are actually one thing. And if you don't see it, it's because you've chosen not to look. It's always there. I've yet to find somebody in the breakthrough experience that have had traumatic events or whatever, or challenging events, that we can't find the other side to. If we just get a look. They want to run their story, it's not there, I don't want to look, they don't want to look. But when we actually pin them down and get there and look, they find it. So it was there the whole time. And I always say, why have the wisdom of the ages with the aging process when you can have the wisdom of the ages without it? The quality of your life is based on the quality of the questions you ask. If you ask questions and reveal to you both sides of an event, you liberate yourself from the emotional baggage of a one-sided thinking.
I love it. Okay, so what I want to do just for a moment is just step more into the corporate world and have a look at the challenge of corporate mental health and the stress within the working environment. What would you, in your opinion, how could corporate environments and corporate working ethics improve to actually help support and reduce the work-related mental health and stress?
Well, every human being lives by a set of priorities, a set of values. And they don't go to work for the sake of a company. They go to work to fulfill what's most meaningful to them, their highest values. So when you're hiring somebody, in my opinion, I think it's wise, and I train companies on this, to identify what's truly their values first. Because every decision they make is based on what they believe will give them the greatest advantage or disadvantage, greatest reward or risk to their highest values. So if you don't know what their highest values, you really don't know who the person is. Because their highest value, their life revolves around. So first identify what their values are. That takes 30 minutes in the value determination process on the website. Once they've done that, then it's wise to go and take the job description and the mission, vision, and primary objectives of the company and to see how congruent they are with those values. Because if you're about to hire somebody and they can't see how their job description is going to help them fulfill their highest values, they're not going to be fulfilled. They're not going to be engaged, they're not going to be inspired. You're going to need to motivate them from the outside, incentivize them with rewards and punishments, and they're not going to be productive. But if they can see how what they're doing in their job is fulfilling their highest value, and they can see how the mission of the company is helping them fulfill their dreams, then they're going to be engaged because they're going to feel like, I got an opportunity of a lifetime to work for this company. It's helped me get what I want. Because they're going to fulfill their values. Now, if you hire somebody, I recommend hiring people and looking and screening them according to values. If they're already there and they're maybe not as productive and as inspired as they could be, then I show people how to link that, HR departments and managers, how to link their job descriptions to their values so they can see how what they're doing serves them.
So it's there, it just hasn't come apparent.
They just haven't been aware of it, and I show them the links. And the skilled manager knows how to do that. They know how to communicate in the values of the people, allocate job descriptions that match the values of the people, and or link the job descriptions to the values so they're engaged and inspired and productive. Because otherwise you're going to have to micromanage people, you're going to have to incentivize them and all this other stuff. And it weighs you down as a company and causes the overheads to go up and profits to go down. And when you're a leader, you're living by a set of values. And you're going to project those values onto your people. If you're an autocrat, you'll project onto and not care about the people's values. Just like a person going out and selling, if they're not caring about the customer's values, they don't sell well. They're looking down and caring less about the customer than themselves. So the leader has the responsibility to communicate what they value and what they're wanting for the company in terms of the people's values, and that's a skill. And if they don't learn to do that, it becomes autocratic, and it ends up being a control with rules and regulations which bog down companies, and bureaucracies are burned. So caring enough about another human being to help them fulfill their highest values is the secret of achievement, customer sales, negotiation, leadership, management, all areas. So I'm interested in that. I've developed methods for that, implemented them into companies, and increased the productivity and profit line of the company. Not because they're focused on more money, they're focused on caring about people, and when people are doing what they love, they produce. When people can't wait to get up in the morning and serve, people can't wait to get their service.
So what I'm hearing there is that there is even an appropriate way of creating KPIs relevant to someone's core value.
Well, the KPI, if it's not matching their values, they're going to procrastinate, hesitate, and frustrate. Anything that's low on a person's values, they're going to need to be reminded to do. My highest value is teaching. I do it every day. My lower values are cooking and driving. I haven't driven in 25 years and I haven't cooked since I was 24. So the probability of me going out and cooking and driving is like 0. But the probability of me researching and teaching is like 100%. So if I was in a job description that had to cook and drive, I'd probably need punishments and rewards and incentives, and I'd probably be fired. But you put me in a position where I get to research and teach, and you don't ever have to remind me of again. I'm in my zone. So you got to make sure that you get the right person on the bus, as Jim Collins says, and allocate appropriately to the value systems. But the key, that's management. As Drucker says, management is responsible for all that. It's not people are not working. I always people watch managers that aren't effective, hire people that are less effective than them, that they can control, that they hire that are not engaged, and they're not selecting wisely, and then they blame people. As Drucker said, it's management's responsibility to care enough about people to find out what their needs are, to make sure that the positions match those needs. And it may take longer to find that person, but once you find them, you got the right person on the bus. Mm.
So if teaching is your very first core value, what is your second and third?
Well, mine is researching. Well, if teaching is number 1, researching and writing is number 2, because I research and write every single day. I'm always writing books. And then I obviously love to travel, because my life shows it. I'm at 17 million miles of travel. And then probably the next one is economics. I wanted to get paid handsomely to do what I love, because I want to be financially independent, because I didn't want to have to do what I did for the sake of having to make money. I wanted my money working for me instead of me working for that. And then probably next is relationships and family dynamics. And everybody judges different people. I'm always amazed how people subordinate to other people's expectations because they're putting their values on you. The key is not to subordinate to anybody else's values, but to live true to your own. And I got people, I had people come up to me and said, you know, Dr. Demartini, you hardly see your kids. And I said, really? I said, well, you're a terrible father. I said, how come? I said, well, because you don't see your kids. And I said, well, why would you want a terrible father seeing his kids? I joke with them. I said, because I have a different set of values. My kids and I spent a lot of time. I was just with one in Honolulu, and I was just the other one in Houston, and both of them in Houston, actually, the other two. They're all grown up now. But I don't have that as my highest value. And I'm grateful for that. I have great kids. I love them. I'm inspired by them, but they've not been always my highest value. And they don't have me as their highest value. So you just got to be honest with who you are and not try to set goals that aren't you. If you set a goal that's not matching your values, you're going to end up with the ABCDs of negativity, you're going to feel depressed, and you're going to get a feedback to say you're not being authentic. I'd rather be able to say I love me for who I am and go and do what I love and inspire them, because then I teach my kids to go and be authentic. And all three of my kids have their missions today because of it. They know what they're wanting to do, they're going after it, and they're succeeding at it.
Does exercise sit anywhere on a value for you?
I do. I have, instead of Ab magazine, I'm on Blab magazine. I got ripples on the side of my masseter muscle because I speak so much.
Okay.
No, I work out and I have wires to my jaw to all the other muscles, so whenever I speak, it's using my muscles.
Does everything.
I do push-ups and sit-ups and stretch and some yoga and some swimming and some surfing occasionally. But I'm not this gym fanatic. I work out and I'm doing good. I'm 61 and I'm doing pretty good.
Wow,
Yeah.
61.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
You look amazing for 61.
I've been blessed. I had a young woman come up to me one time at a cheesecake factory. I was in a kind of a darkened cheesecake factory restaurant, and I was slurping some soup really quick. And this girl came up to me, and she said, "Sir, would you like to join me and this other lady over at the table?" I looked over there. There's another girl over there. They're about half my age. And I thought, this is ridiculous. And I said, "Do you mind if I ask you what made you come over here?" And she says, "Well, you looked interesting, and you looked successful, and we thought it would be entertaining to have you come and join us." I said, "Well, thank you for that." I said, "Do you mind if I ask you another question?" She says, "No." I said, "How old do you think I am?" And she said, "Well, I thought you're maybe mid-40s or something like that." And I said, "If I told you I was more the 60 mark, would you still want me over there?" She says, "Well, if you're busy," and I didn't.
Gone.
I thought that's so funny.
You're funny.
But she was a dark environment helped me look a little younger.
Okay, so I have to ask, because my love of food and nutrition, what's your diet?
My diet? Well, first of all, I'm a water freak. I don't drink anything but water. So I don't, no sweets, no coffees, no teas. I've had 3 cups of coffee my entire life. I don't drink anything but water.
And is there a type of quality of water?
Well, I've investigated bottled waters, and not all bottled waters are really that great. So I try to get the best water I can. And filtered water is probably one of the better ones today. But some bottled water. But in the morning I have fresh fruit, usually grapes, but usually fresh fruit, mango, something like that. Yogurt or cottage cheese, and multigrain toast. That's a typical breakfast. At lunch, I'll usually have a soup, a salad, a sandwich, sushi, or salmon. And most of the time it's a sandwich or a salad. And at dinner I usually have some salmon or some fish, some carrots, some spinach, and some multigrain bread. That's it. I'm a really simple guy. And people always want to take me to these fancy restaurants, and I said, "Can I get a bowl of soup?" And well, why taking you to the best restaurant in town? I go, "I'd like a bowl of soup, thank you." And I don't want all the creamy, cheesy stuff. I don't like oily, boily, limpy, wimpy foods. I like something that has substance and something that's... I learned a long time ago from Paul Bragg, I don't live to eat, I eat to live. So I don't want to put something in my body that's not really going to help me perform and help me accomplish what I want to accomplish, because it's too important. My life's too important.
So do you choose organically for that?
If I can. Sometimes I'm traveling constantly, so I don't just go organic in first class, thank you, organic. So
But when possible.
I try to do the best I can. And when I'm in certain locations, I can get really quality food. In some areas I can't. So I don't sit there and ram my head about it. I'm grateful for it. I realize that we can get so neurotic about what we eat that we can make the anxiety and cause the problems from that. So if I'm in an environment where I can get the greatest food, I get it. If I'm not, I'd be grateful for what I get, and I eat wisely. And I can always find those things wherever I go around the world.
Okay. 2 last questions. We've taken the stigma out of mental health as being an illness. So if we don't here today call mental health an illness, what do we call it?
I call mental illness as a feedback mechanism to help us live more authentically and guide us to live by our highest values. Because when people do, their entire psychology changes. When people start to prioritize their life, I was speaking in Dallas, Texas at the Anatole for Mary Kay Cosmetics. And Mary Kay Ash was an amazing lady. She's impacted a lot of women. And I walked up to Mary Kay after I spoke and I said, what advice can you give a young, aspiring speaker that's traveling the world speaking? And she said, every day, she had her hair all like this, she said, every day, write down the 6 or 7 highest priority actions that you can do today that can help you fulfill your dreams. And go and do them. They're just daily actions, not projects, daily actions that you get done that day. And go get them done, and then reward yourself at the end of the day. And when you prioritize your life, you live by the ABCs, you grow in self-worth. And you grow in accomplishment. And little baby steps build momentum into big dreams. And if you set big goals that are overwhelming and they're not yours and they're expectations and they're subordinate from other people's projections, you beat yourself up. So when you do that and you strategize your life effectively, you're grateful, you feel love for life, and you achieve. So I always say that anything you can't say thank you for is baggage. And mental health is trying to get you to live that way. Mental health is attempting to get you authentically. And you keep holding on to fantasies, you keep subordinating to other people's expectation. We're not here to live in the shadows of anyone, we're here to stand on the shoulders of giants.
I love it. So that's a beautiful segue to my last question. We're a great believer at Healthy Me Summits on the I am statement, and that neuroscience has done a wonderful job at validating finally what philosophers of all time have always said: we are what we think. What is your I am statement every morning?
I think it was Descartes, the French philosopher, mathematician, who basically said, you know, I think, therefore I am. My statement, my affirmation, my first affirmation that I ever got was from my 4th grade teacher. I am quiet, I sit in my chair, and I do my homework. And that worked, actually, because I stopped talking. My second affirmation was given to me by Paul Bragg, who said when I had learning problems, he said to overcome them, say, I'm a genius and I apply my wisdom. And that had an impact on my life, and I still say that every single day of my life. But I would say that I'm just me. That's it. I'm just me. People want to be something other than who they are. I was asked by Vogue magazine one time, Dr. Demartini, if there's anybody in the world you could be, in the world, who could you want to be? I go, me. I wouldn't want to be anybody but me.
Everyone else is taken.
No, everybody else is taken, and I can't think of anybody else I'd rather be than me. So I love myself, and that's great. So many people have difficulty doing that.
Dr. Demartini, thank you so much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure for your wisdom, your knowledge, and your time and energy.
Thank you for bringing this message to the world.
Thank you.
Thank you.